me.
Can,
And
can
Right.
you can you tell me why like city councils of cities in America are passing resolutions like for ceasefire in Israel? Do you think Netanyahu gives a fuck that Chicago thinks they shouldn't bomb them? Like, what the fuck? How? Like, yeah, because there's nothing going on in Chicago. Like, we just need
Right.
to just fucking wait. There's no crime or anything, or
Right.
I don't know, like 20 innocent black children getting killed every weekend.
Every fucking day, but y'all are worried
Nobody
about
cares.
Israel and Palestine, and y'all can't even correct the problems within your own the radius of your city.
You
That's
know,
insane.
what's crazy, Q, is I don't know the exact statistic, but I would actually probably bet that there's more black children killed every weekend in major cities, innocent black young children under the age of probably 12, than there are kids who've been killed in the Israel conflict.
You know what? That would be a valid assessment. I wouldn't exactly know the statistic verbatim, but that's a very valid observation. I think there could be some actual merit to that, just because, for one, it's ongoing. This Israel-Palestinian conflict is something that, they have their own catalyst for it. But you're talking about kids, the youth in the inner cities. Listen, I was a youth counselor, and when I was a youth counselor, there were 11-year-olds bringing guns to camp. And and
Wow.
and and I'm like, why do you need that? Because somebody might try to fuck with me, and I'm gonna kill him. Like, there, I'm telling you, you grow up in these youth black neighborhoods. This is the norm. This is the
Mm-hmm.
norm. I've when I first moved to Chester, when I was in Chester, when I was living in Chester, I probably lost about 6 or 7 friends, or know of, kids that I counseled who died to gun violence
Yes.
before the age of 18.
Same.
damn.
And yeah, it's really bad. It's terrible.
But
So
they always say
how do we?
one lost life is too many. But why doesn't anybody care? And I've gone, dude, our rant, this is my biggest rant ever. I do it all the time. Why doesn't anybody care about young black children in this country?
Because we don't have any fathers. That's where it starts. Our community is fucked up because because the nuclear family, it has dissipated into oblivion. It's nothing there. So when you talk about, I mean, at the end of the day, the father instills the foundation of the values, the principles. He provides the discipline. He provides the direction, the guidance, the ability to be objective, the ability to be stoic, the ability to make the right decisions. When you take that, when you take the father out of the house, it is nothing but chaos. And that's what we
Mm-hmm.
see in a lot of these black youth. They die because they're single mothers, don't give a fuck about what they're doing. They're out running the
Mm-hmm.
streets. They find camaraderie and family in the street life. They sell drugs because they want money, because they're on Section 8 and their mothers can't provide them with the things that they want, that they see other kids who may have their fathers or who come from middle class families actually have. They're like, you know what? I want that. How do I get that? I want girls. How do I get girls? And the only way they know how to get access to these things is engage in high risk behaviors that involve theft, that involve violence. They have to do these things because that's the age where testosterone is starting to
Yep.
flare. And I always say, emotionality, when emotionality meets testosterone, you've created a monster. That's what fathers are for. Fathers are there to guide that testosterone. They're there to hone that testosterone.
Yep.
They're there to show you what you should utilize, how you should channel your aggression, and what you should put it into, and how you should hone it to where you use it only when certain situations demand that level of aggression, or that level of they teach diplomacy versus which situations warrant aggression. And we don't have that. So a lot of these kids, they just are left hanging in the balance, and they make their own decisions. Kids are really fucking stupid. They make really stupid decisions, and they're just out in the streets, out and about, and they end up killed.
So how do you think? Like, where do we go with it? Because honestly, as long as it's being used as a way to divide black and white people, because and it's very strange. Like, we've had people back away from these conversations with us before because two white guys, a Jewish guy, a white guy, talking about race and stuff like that in today's world is seen as taboo, right? But where do we go with this? Because I see like black people basically saying like, well, cops should stop killing black people. And then other people, including black people, pull up the statistics like, well, maybe we should stop committing crimes, you know?
Right.
And then they're like, oh, well, I mean, you probably get it too. You're probably called an Uncle Tom or all that bullshit, whatever the
Yeah.
leftists want to
Yeah.
call you, right? But let's be real, like, there's reality to these numbers, you know? So what do we do to make it so they don't have to commit crime? And again, it starts with the fathers. But how do we fix this? Because basically, men will just fucking go. And we have a lot of weak ass men right now. Like a lot of weak ass men. Because they were never shown fathers too, right? So what would you suggest as a behavioral scientist would be the first step for not just the black community, but I would say more of like the inner city communities and the poorer communities around the country. Where do we go? Because I can tell you this right now, it's not a black and white thing. The area I live in right now is the country. Like all my neighbors have cows, all my neighbors have rabbits, chickens, everything like that, right? I'd say it's about 50% white and 50% black. Like, I mean, it's a good 50-50. Like half my neighbors are black, half my neighbors are white. It's fucking awesome, frankly. We have fucking great ass fucking bonfires. But I think it's more of an inner city thing. Where do we go with this? Because my personal opinion. I know this is a long question because where do we go with this? But I also believe that just living in a city is not healthy for people in general. Because I think we're supposed to be like free range instead of insects, like living in hives, right? But how do we get it to the point where people want to they want to care about the future and their children? Like how do we make people care about the fucking kids?
I honestly think it's a lost cause. I don't think we can actually
Wow.
achieve that outcome.
I don't
And
know.
the reason I say that is because you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. It's too much agency. It's too much personal agency. It's too much autonomy in America. Too many people have the right to make the decisions that they want to make. And only if you are able to reach a large number of individuals to where they themselves have a large enough influence to impact it trickles down to everyone else, would you be able to get that outcome. I don't see that happening because most people, one, are arrogant. They don't see anything wrong with what they do. They don't believe they need to change. And most people are determined to live their lives the way that they want to live their lives because nobody holds their feet to the fire. No one holds them accountable for the decisions that they make, especially if they can get away with a lot of the things that they do. And I think it's too much of that. It's a vast array of like individuality, just people operating on their own principles, on their own values. And as long as there's nothing to intercept and tell them, hey, this is wrong, and they're receptive to that, and they say, you know what, you're right, I do want to change. I don't think we're able to reach a large amount of people in order to evoke that change. That's my personal opinion. Just looking at knowing the way that humans operate, I just don't see it.
I think a lot of it's
Wow.
systemic. As someone who grew up in those areas, you're in this area. You're not, see, where I live, we're very fortunate. Most parents are dual household, very high income. Kids are really good. They're respectful. Yes, sir. No, sir. Very good kids. There's a couple bad ones, I'm sure, but overall they're great. It's probably the exact opposite of what you'll see in the inner city. These kids aren't worried about their geometry paper. They're worried about not getting stabbed or shot on the way to school. Now, the reason it's systemically racist, and I'm going to say that, very few white people will say that, especially on the conservative side, is because who's in those neighborhoods? Black people.
Yeah.
Which schools are the most underfunded? Inner city black schools. It's a shit show. It is terrible because no good teacher wants to teach there. So you're getting shit teachers. They have no funding and they're basically cast aside, and they have no positive male role models. The kids who do make it out of there, you know who the ones who make it out of there are? Athletes, because they have something to live for. They have something to play for. And guess what that coach, this is me. Guess what that male coach is? That's his dad. He has a father figure. For me, it was a guy named Coach Miles. Okay.
Coach McKinney.
You have to have a strong male, and you have to have a reason for living beyond not dying.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, these kids are set up to fail. These poor, and I say poor not as in financially poor, these disenfranchised young black men are born into a situation with an absentee black father, thrown into a situation with crappy schools, with crappy role models. The guy who makes the money is the OG in the gang. For those who don't know, the OG is kind of like, I like using this metaphor, the CEO of the gang.
Yep.
He's the guy running shit. He's the guy calling the shots. So you want to be like Pookie, the OG. You're not looking up to Mark Cuban. You're not looking up to Dana White. You're not looking up to other powerful, successful CEOs. You're looking up to the guy who's running the streets.
Yep.
And there's no man there to tell you, dude, you should probably go to class. You should probably do your homework. You should probably go exercise and play a sport. So the kids who do find football, and you saw this back in the 80s and 90s, University of Miami, the Hurricanes, where they were an amazing football team, but all their players, they used to call it Convict U. And when they played Notre Dame, the game was billed the convicts versus the Catholics. And because they took these inner city kids, they gave them an opportunity. Unfortunately, it's hard to get that street mentality out of someone who all they know is the street life.
Yep.
So white people, these conservative groups, they love to claim that systemic racism is not a thing. It's more systemic classism. It just happens to affect the black child more than it affects the white child as a majority.
I don't completely disagree with that. I just say I can't attribute it. I particularly don't like attributing it to systemic racism due to the fact that there was a point where the black community was once in pretty good shape. And that
77% father and mother households in the 60s, which was the height of the civil rights movement. So you can't say, I think we say racism was worse when they were spraying black people with fire hoses, sicking dogs on them, and making them drink out of separate water fountains.
Yeah, but the black
I would say that because the black community held each other accountable.
Exactly. So as long as that factor is there, I will say that, anytime you have an equation and you look at what the outcome is, you look at what the control variable is. And in that sense, it's the family. So when the family was present, even through the most adverse conditions against actual racism, the black family was still intact. The black family still thrived. Once that black man got eliminated from the household, once Lyndon B. Johnson put in that Welfare Act and black women started accepting Section 8 and didn't need a man in the house, and they was going around checking to see if men was in the house, it just became chaotic. It became chaotic because a woman can't raise a man. And then these men, they're sneaking in, getting these women pregnant, and then they're out, and these women are telling them they don't need them because they have Section 8, and these guys don't want to marry them. So we're creating a whole bunch of broken homes. And then essentially like I said, it's just where you're raising little black boys, because it's mostly black boys. Both black boys commit most of the violence before age of 25. The overwhelming majority of violent crime is committed by them. When that testosterone meets emotionality and they have something to prove and they're trying to attract women, this is what you get. This is the cesspool of degeneracy that you get, that we see now. And the only way that it could ever be reversed is either a mass exodus of the black community out of America, or a meteor hits the black community and black culture just starts over from scratch.
I'm a little more optimistic than you, Q. I think that it can be fixed. I just don't think anybody wants to do it. Like, I don't think they want to help fix crime in Chicago because it helps people get elected. They play that race card. And I don't see, because look, man, you're telling me if we were to actually spend billions of dollars on our communities instead of Ukraine, instead of Israel, instead of the military industrial complex, we were to infuse that into programs for kids. Let's say the government said, hey, Mark and Bryce, we want you to start a legacy out here and train these kids. Okay. We've had kids come to us who were going the wrong path. They end up going D1, They didn't go pro, but they end up getting a degree, getting good jobs, starting a family, and ending the cycle. It's a microcosm that leads to a macro casualty in that you have, if you were to think about it, one child at a time. If every strong male helped one child, we would fix it. We would fix this. I do because I've done it myself. I've done it, and I'm not even that great. I'm okay. I'm not a nurturer. I'm just going to yell at you and tell you to do more bench presses. All right. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. And that's Coach Miles. Like, just for those of you sick and tired of hearing about Coach Miles, he was the linebacker coach. Basically, he probably doesn't know. He was a pastor. And just give you a background on him, a big ex-CFL Canadian Football League. He's still working at Culver City High School. Big black dude. Harsh as hell. Not one politically correct bone in that man's body. He used to call me things that I didn't think pastors were allowed to say, and reverence. But the thing is, he was that strong man. Now, I had a father in the house, but he wasn't a strong man. So Coach Miles, he would tell me when I messed up, and he would tell me all those lessons I learned. And I always put this, I get a lot of heat for it. I say youth sports can save the world. They're like, no, it can't. Well, yes, one child at a time. And we look at things from a macro perspective, but no one wants to help their own community.
Right.
You know, that's why I belong to Rotary. Rotary is service above self. You know, Rotary is about community service. And that's why I love the organization. So if we all did for the community, like in Rotary, there's like 30, 40 people per chapter. And they raise tons of money and they help so many causes. But you think about the population, that's less than 0.2% of any city. You know what I mean? Even small towns. So I think a lot of people just need to go out and make a difference in their own community. And that includes the inner city. That also means people who live outside Chicago. I'm guilty of this as well. I applied to be on the Boys and Girls Club, but I just ran out of time. It should have been a priority. Because I would have been there. I would have taken in 2 or 3 kids as a mentor, but I didn't do it because I was selfish. Right. And I was selfish in a good way because I wanted to spend that time with my own kids. So,
but see, you see one of the real world obstacles that these people run into as well, because then you want to prioritize yourself and you want to look out for your own well-being as well. And I want to ask you, because I like what you said in theory, and I've been one to advocate for that as well. But like I said, I've been knee deep in it as well, because I've actually been a youth counselor in one of the most dangerous cities in the world. You know what I mean?
You've seen it.
Yes, so I've seen it, and I've also seen how difficult it is, even with guidance, even with persistence, even consistently being there and trying to provide kids with some, insight about what they can become, who they can become, which direction they shouldn't go, what risks they shouldn't take. And every time they leave that talk from you, they're exposed to stimuli that puts them right back in the mindset that they have to be in order to feel like they have to survive. So when they're with you, they understand. They're like, when I'm with you, I feel like I'm home. And that's why I like movies like Gridiron Gang and Coach Carter, because you said that's why they're so good, because they show you the potential that you have to shift a person's life if you give them that discipline and that correction as a masculine male figure who tells them the real and loves them through and show tough love. But at the same time, there's always going to be some who still end up dead, who still end up in prison. And so you have to ask yourself, how many is enough that you've changed to where you feel like you've actually made significant change on a macro scale?
It would take a lot of people, a lot of love, a lot of hearts, but I'm an optimist. I'm a romantic, I'm one of those guys who's always like, what can we do as a society? How can we help people? Alan's the same way. He yells at fat